Greetings everyone, if you're looking for a human form druid on Diablo 4 Endgame, this is my storm druid to decimate your enemies a bit like Darth Sidious. Before I start, you need to understand how the nature passive and the storm works. If you channel the storm, you won't be able to proc the nature because it doesn't count as a new spell. Of course, the idea is to enjoy the full stack of the storm and also to be able to enjoy the nature passive. To do so, you simply need to load your storm in order to always be at the full stack. Because if you cast again the storm, it will refresh the stack duration, and it's quite easy to always have this full stack for the whole duration of a nightmare dungeon, for example. Then instead of channeling, you just need to click several times on the spell, and that way it will trigger the landslide. So basically, you just need to do your stacks and then simply use the spell as a regular spell and not as a channeling one. So now for the remaining skills, you want to play the whole in order to gain life and attack speed, this one for the healing and the fortify, the bulwark for the barrier and unstoppable, and of course our ultimate. Also, we'll use the fact that this spell will shapeshift you with the Paragon setup. I'll explain this a bit later in the Paragon. For the gear, you want to have this legendary power in order to reduce the cooldown of this spell. You'll see in the gameplay that just by using the Lightning Storm, it will be very easy to always cast the Bulwark. Then you have some damage reduction on basic attack, this one for the landslide which will use a second pillar, and this one for the Earthen Bulwark duration. You have the +2 to Earth skill while fortify, and the next two are very important. First one, increase damage while fortify on your core skills, and this one, increase critical strike damage for Earth skill and increase critical strike chance for storm skills. The good thing is that you'll only be needing to use this spell in order to have both effects. For the ring, you either want increased damage while you stand still, or you can take the increased attack speed when you land a critical hit with a core skill. For the last one, you want some spirit. This one is not the best in slot, but I didn't have the other one, so if possible, take the spirit when you land a CC on enemies, which is better than this one. For the boons, you'll want some damage reduction on elites, increased critical strike damage, this one to restore spirit on a lucky hit, and here it will grant you fortify when you use one of the 3 spells. Lastly, you have a chance to reduce your ultimate cooldown on a lucky hit. On the gear, you'll want Sapphire in order to have some damage reduction while fortified, and this one to increase critical strike damage on crown control enemies. Lastly, diamonds in your accessories. For the stats, first you'll want some more willpower that you can have on your gear. Then you also want core skill damage in order to boost our main damage. After that, critical strike chance, critical strike damage, and a bit of lucky hit. If possible, put some lucky hit on both of your rings and also on your gloves. On your gloves, with some luck, you can also have this one increasing both our core skills, which are of course very strong, so if possible, try to get this +4. Lastly, some damage reduction and, if possible, a bit of dexterity to finish this setup. For the skill tree, you want to play the Wind Shear in order to have a chance to make enemies vulnerable. You can also take this one, increasing your movement speed. Then we get to our core skills, so 5 points here and 5 points here, and you want this in order to have a chance to immobilize enemies. You also want to have this one here, creating a new pillar with landslide on immobilized enemies. You want this passive which will boost your core damage, and then we have the defensive setup, so 5 points in the bulwark with the fact that it will fortify, 1 point here, and for the whole you want to have attack speed, for the warrior, the healing during its duration. You also have this passive, increasing non-physical resistances, and this one for additional damage reduction when you use one of these skills. We go down and we have 3 points here in order to make enemies vulnerable, some damage increase for Earth skill, and here also damage for Earth skill if you have enough fortify. As will always be in fortify, it doesn't matter too much this amount, so you put 2 points here, and we go down in order to get increased damage to elites. This one increased damage for Earth on vulnerable and storm on CC enemies, our ultimate, and of course our K passive. For the Paragon setup, you want to have this glyph in order to boost your damage in human form, and then we'll get our first legendary node just here, which will increase your damage after spending spirit. you'll get the second leaf, this one. It's important that you put it here. It will increase your damage to crowd control and vulnerable enemies, but also boost your magic nodes. Especially that you have some core skill damage nodes, so it's important to have this one. You can also take the intelligence and some dexterity in order to be boosted by this glyph. On your way you can also get this node in order to get core skill damage, and then we'll get here with this glyph granting you some damage while fortify. It's in intelligence, so make sure to get the intelligence node and the legendary node. After shapeshifting, your spirit cost will be reduced. That's why we take the hole and the roar. On your way you have some damage and attack speed, here some critical damage, and we'll get to this board which will increase damage to crowd control enemies for her skills. We have this glyph which will increase your core skill damage, very important in dexterity, so make sure to get all this dexterity node, and you can also take this one increasing critical strike damage to crowd control enemies. To finish this paragon, we want to get the increased damage to vulnerable. Of course you'll get this rare node, and since it's in dexterity, make sure to get the dexterity node, and we'll finish with this one, critical strike damage and damage to crowd control enemies. For the gameplay, at the beginning don't forget to do your stacks, and then it's easy, just spam the storm in order to kill your enemies. You'll often have your ultimate, so make sure to use it if you have a pack of elites, and otherwise you have your defensive spells. For the hole and the roar, just use them when you want, but pay a particular attention to the bulwark. You just need to make sure to always have your barrier. It's easy because you'll often have your bulwark, but don't forget that it will also grant you unstoppable. So just keep an eye on it, make sure to have a barrier and to use it at the right time. For bosses or elite pack, it's the same pattern, you just need to use your storm in order to kill them quite easily. Thanks for watching this video. I hope that you like this endgame build human form on Diablo 4, and don't forget that you find our builds and guides on Diablo 4 on slashingcrypts.com.